So thank you very much for the invitation. I hope to share with you some of our research on the Hebrew and Aramaic scrolls from the Dead Sea area, and to focus specifically on handwriting quality, and combining there, well, what we do as paleographers and how we look at it, and how AI can help us, can have added value. So in 2021, we demonstrated that there were two scribes at work in the Great Isaiah Scroll. But maybe before, just for those who don't know, the Dead Sea Scrolls, here you see the Dead Sea area, a number of caves in the vicinity of an ancient settlement. Manuscripts were found in the 40s, 50s, in that area also in the 60s still. And we're dealing with manuscripts that are, say, from the 3rd, maybe also 4th century BCE until the 1st and 2nd century CE. Now, as I mentioned, I want to talk about integrating these new technologies alongside traditional methods. And I will look at the research which we did on the Great Isaiah Scroll, where we showed that two scribes were at work. And I will also look at writing quality and skills, about which I published this year, and then take it further here in combining it, the paleographic judgment, with AI tools and quantification. And I want to address very basic questions such as what is quality and how do we know? So when we look first at integrating the new technologies, paleography and AI, I first want to give some reflection on integrating them and some considerations. So in traditional paleography, paleographers would study the pertinent or significant features in a script. These significant features can be studied at two levels. First, the general level. The significant features can show at the level of the models learned in training by scribes. In our research in Groningen, we call this the mimetic or cultural aspect of handwriting. At the general level, paleographers look for similarities in different manuscripts according to their script. These are the culturally or mimetically shared features. The second level is that of the individual scribe. In our research, we call this the genetic or biomechanical aspect of handwriting. So, searching for significant features in the handwriting or hand of an individual scribe, paleographers then look for differences in manuscripts that are of similar general style. So for paleographers, it is important to look at the significant features. Once you have defined which features are important, then you can begin your analysis. The problem, of course, is how exactly do you get there? How exactly does one get there at knowing which features are significant? What analysis underlies establishing, defining which features are important? The problem in paleography with knowing which differences are likely to be idiographic and thus significant is that in the end, this also involves using implicit criteria that are experience-based. And this is one of the challenges for paleographers to explicate their paleographic expert knowledge. The computer can help bridge this. The computer can do this analysis on a numerical level. It can quantify this for us, and thus also make the paleographic process more transparent than often in traditional paleography. AI is a calculator, a tool for the paleographer, as is, for example, the microscope for the biologist. Now, with the availability of digital images, the computer is another tool that we can use. And in our project, we work with the digital images from the Israel Antiquities Authority in their Leon Levi Dead Sea Scrolls digital library. And we also use digital images that were made available by Brill publishers. So we have two data sources. Now, if I move ahead to writer identification in the Great Isaiah Scroll, I will not go now into details about the entire analysis and evidence for two scribes. You can read that in the article. It goes from the digital image, as you can see on the top left. We have a binarization AI-based tool for extracting the handwritten ink remains. And then we perform various feature analyses. We also use more traditional statistical analysis, and also in a third step, a post hoc visual analysis. But I will not go into too many details here now. I want to highlight an important difference that we noted between the two scribes. Although the second scribe could closely mirror the writing style of the first scribe, each scribe shows different writing patterns. We demonstrated that the second scribe shows more variable writing patterns. I will come back to this difference in writing pattern later in my paper. Now, as a third step, I studied also the handwriting quality more broadly in all the Isaiah and what we call the Serach HaYachad, the Rule of the Community manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I want to come back to the quote that Claire gave yesterday in her presentation by Kim Heinz Eidsen, talking about beautiful, elegant, pleasing, and saying the use of such terms to describe antique hands is inevitably linked to modern individual notions of aesthetics and style. Now, some of the features that I look at from a traditional paleographic perspective when looking at the quality of handwriting involves not only the scribe's formation of individual letters according to that style, but also looking at the regularity in size, ductus, height, and inking, as well as the proportion and arrangement of letters, words, and lines horizontally and vertically. Now, I do not want to dwell too long on all these different manuscripts, but I will give a few examples that, even if to the untrained eye, you will see variation in the handwriting. We're dealing here with manuscripts to which I applied heuristically a quality assessment that I took from William Johnson's work on the Oxyrhynchus papyri, and talk then about what we call substandard quality, professional, and elegant handwriting. Now, many examples we have in the scrolls are of, I would say, unskilled or untrained scribes producing lower quality copies, not all of which were actual complete book rolls. So, for example, with the Isaiah, we have here various fragments of the book of Isaiah, but there are also other reasons to assume that these were not complete copies of the entire book. When we look at, for example, the Serach HaYachad, the Rule of the Community manuscripts, also there we have half of them being of what we then call substandard quality. And here are a few of those. And sometimes we also have very nice examples where the handwriting is very regular and very consistent, as here, for example. Now, let us return to handwriting quality and ask how AI tools can benefit the paleographer in their subjective or intersubjective assessments. Now, in our previous work, we have looked at variation between writers and also at the variation within the handwriting of one scribe, which contributes to the individual handwriting profile that we make of a scribe. Now, what I want to suggest in the presentation here today is to connect this aspect of within writer variation with handwriting quality. As paleographers, we can look at regularity and consistency of handwriting, as I've explained earlier. The regularity in size, ductus, height, and inking, as well as the proportion and arrangement of letters, words, and lines. So, with regard to the basic question, what is handwriting quality? I suggest that it at least involves regularity and consistency. These are clearer categories than beautiful, elegant, or pleasing. Regularity and consistency can underlie or inform such aesthetic judgments. My question then is, if we use AI tools, can we then use within writer variation as a means to quantify such quality of handwriting regarding regularity and consistency? In other words, if within writer variation can count as a criterion for quality of handwriting, is the use of the quantified data from AI approaches then more objective? Because we're dealing here, or because we should say, there is no human interference, there is no bias, there is just data. So we did a small test, and it's a restricted test, and it's comparative on 3 manuscripts and 4 scribes. The 3 manuscripts are the Great Isaiah Scroll, 1Q Isaiah A, where we demonstrated that there are 2 scribes there, and then 2 other Isaiah manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q56 and 4Q57. So we cannot comment on absolute terms whether handwriting is good or bad. It's a relative assessment, and more research on the whole corpus is forthcoming. Now, in this test, we took 4 steps for writer quality or variability. First of all, we have, of course, as I mentioned, the data, the digital images from Braille and from the IAA, courtesy of the photographer Shai Halevi. And we take several steps with this data, the image processing. I mentioned on our work on the Great Isaiah Scroll already the use of this binarization tool developed by Maruf Bainet. We filter for noise reduction, apply rotation and skew correction, and also use manual cleaning using GIMP. Then we also apply image splitting and augmentation. For example, with the Great Isaiah Scroll, we have there more than 7 meters length of scroll. It's a lot of data. We have 54 columns there. And instead of using the whole column, we also separated the columns in various parts and threw all that in the mix. Then after that, we perform feature calculation using textural-based features and allograph-based features. So going to the whole and to more micro levels of the data, going back to the level of pixels. Then we applied with more traditional statistical methods, distance measurement, and measuring all the feature files from the 4 sets of manuscripts. We made plots using measured distance on the horizontal axis and count on the vertical axis. And the entire operation was smoothed using Gaussian kernel. So this is the steps that we took, and I want to share with you the results from this initial test. So if we start first with the Great Isaiah Scroll, here you have an image of the entire scroll, 54 columns, more than 7 meters in length, a lot of data, individual letters, like for example the Aleph, you have it here more than 5,000 times. So it's a lot of good data to work with. So let's first return to the Great Isaiah Scroll then, where we then also already demonstrated that 2 scribes have different handwriting patterns, and also that the second scribe shows more variable writing patterns. So we calculated different distance functions, the chi-square and the Bhattacharya, and that is, we calculated distance between the feature files of different image samples. So for example, for 1/2 of the Great Isaiah Scroll, we have around 700 distance counts. Now here you can see an example of 3 columns from the first half. So where we have the first scribe at work, and this is the binarized images. So we do not work with how you say we have the original handwritten pattern, so we don't have how do you say, I forget the word now, fonts. Yeah, we don't use modern fonts to show or to transcribe the text. We have the actual handwritten text by the scribe from the digital images extracted. And here you have a few examples from 3 columns of the second half of the Great Isaiah Scroll, where the second scribe was active. And here you can see an example of the plots that we used, and later I'll show a few more plots. And yeah, for the 2 halves of the Great Isaiah Scroll in blue and in red, the difference can be seen for the within writer variation. For the second half, that's columns 29 to 54, the count is more spread than for the first half and for the first scribe. Now, this indicates that the regularity and consistency of the second scribe is less than that of the first scribe, though the difference is only slight and can hardly be seen by the naked eye. Now, for comparative purposes, we also took into account 2 other Isaiah manuscripts, as I said, 4Q56 and 4Q57. Now, these 2 manuscripts have far less data than the Great Isaiah Scroll, which, as I said, with more than 7 meters in length, is intact, while 4Q56 and 4Q57 are very fragmentary remains of what were once also large and full copies of the entire book of Isaiah. So where for 1/2 of 1Q Isaiah A, we have around, say, 700 distance accounts, obviously for 4Q56 and 4Q57, that number is lower because there's less data. Nonetheless, there is enough data to work with. And here you have first an example of the IAA images from their Leon Levi website of 4Q56. Here again are binarized and cleaned images, 3 fragments of 4Q56. And here you have an example of a digital image of 4Q57. And again, 2 fragments binarized and cleaned by us. And here you see a distance distribution for all 3 manuscripts and all 4 scribes. Now, also considering the time, if we look at, say, our AI tool from feature calculation and the distance measurement, then we would say that, yeah, first comes in regularity and consistency 4Q57, then the first half of the Great Isaiah Scroll, then the second half of the Great Isaiah Scroll, and then finally 4Q56. This is not to say who is the better writer, because we could not perform false acceptance rate and false rejection rates for the complete collection. That is something that is still for the future. Now, as I said, for feature calculation, we use AI. For the within writer variation, we use traditional statistics, as you can see. Now, together, the feature calculations and the distance measurement, the within writer variation, give a quantitative and more objective basis for assessing handwriting quality in terms of regularity and consistency, which can further inform aesthetic judgments. So, for example, the difference between 4Q56 and 4Q57 is readily clear, even to the untrained eye. I will show them here. So, to the right, you see 4Q57, and to the left, you see 4Q56. And what is interesting is that these 2 manuscripts are in the same style, the so-called Herodian style. Now, in my field of Dead Sea Scroll studies, it seems that the paradigm of so-called deluxe copies, those are particularly elegant copies who are really beautifully written, and codicologically they have large margin sizes and so on. And it seems that in our field, the notion of what consists a deluxe copy is particularly determined by the Herodian type script. Thus, I say, our human assessment can be very biased, favoring manuscripts in Herodian type scripts as deluxe over manuscripts in Hasmonean type script. And that is the example of the Great Isaiah Scroll. It's an earlier type of script, and less manuscripts in that type of script have been counted as deluxe. That can have to do something with maybe our modern sensitivities to regularity, or how we look at the script. Now, I will come in a minute to the added value of using AI in that respect. But already here, from a traditional paleographic view, in the same style, the Herodian style, you can see the difference between the execution of the handwriting in terms of regularity and consistency. The advantage of within-writer variation is that this chronological style difference between, say, Hasmonean or Herodian is irrelevant, because we now look simply at the distance based on the feature analysis. That is the performance of the writer in terms of regularity and consistency, which relates to handwriting quality. So the Hasmonean type script in, for example, the first half of 1Q Isaiah A can be considered as more neatly, more consistently, with less variation than 4Q 56. I will go back here to the plot. But, and this is important in how to read these plots, the different manuscripts cannot be compared in absolute terms of distance as such in this plot. One must not read the axes like that, relative to each other, but one must look at this in terms of variation spread. The manuscripts can be compared to each other in the sense of that the one shows more or less within writer variation than the other. So you cannot point them relatively to each other, considering the distance measurement that you see on the horizontal axis, but you have to look within each manuscript to see what its spread is on the distance axis, to see if it has a wider spread or a less wide spread. Now, this data is independent of our aesthetic judgment. This is completely based on the features, and thus has nothing to do with subjective notions of, say, beauty, or it looks pleasant, or it's elegant. Okay. Oh. For the trained paleographer's eye, these manuscripts show different handwriting quality. So one could say we can already see this, but so the expert paleographic knowledge, the training can be very correct and right, but the added value of using AI is to help explicate paleographic assessment, and also on top of that provide us with quantified and objective data. And this is what we will apply to the whole corpus, and like that build up a database that informs us on a more objective, quantified basis about the quality of handwriting in terms of regularity and consistency. Thank you very much for your attention.